Hello and welcome back to BHookedCrochet.com. I'm your host Brittany, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to crochet the wavelength stitch. This is a simple 4-row pattern repeat that allows you to get very creative when choosing your color palette. To follow along with this demonstration, I'm going to be using Lion Brand Heartland yarn and a size 5.5mm hook. However, this stitch pattern is very versatile and you can use it with any weight yarn and any size hook that coordinates. As I mentioned before, the wavelength stitch is perfect for color work projects, and so for this demonstration I'm going to be using 2 different colors. One I'm going to call the accent color, which is going to be the single crochet stitches. We're going to start off with that color, and then the secondary color is going to be for the larger portions of the stitch. So you'll see what I'm talking about as we move along. So to begin, you just want to start with a slip knot. And for this little test swatch, we're going to chain 30. But know that you can make a project of any length with this stitch, and you want to keep it in multiples of 14, and then you'll add 2 chains to the end. So if you're wanting to make a blanket out of this or anything else that is longer than 30 chains, like we're making for this swatch, then you'll just want to make sure that your final number of chains is a multiple of 14, and then you're going to add 2 chains to the end of that. Okay, so once you have your 30 chains or whatever number of chains you're working with for your particular project, we're going to start on the foundation row, and that is going to be just a row of single crochet. So we're going to just make a single crochet into the second chain from the hook. So we've got this one here is the first chain from the hook. So we're going to work in the second one here and create a single crochet. And we're just going to repeat that for each one of our chains. Now once we're finished with our foundation chain, and if you're going to be switching colors, this is where we would want to bind off. So this is our accent color. This is what's actually going to be seen in smaller amounts. So the single crochet is a shorter stitch, and so this is really just going to be an accent color. So I'm going to be switching colors just to demonstrate how you would do that. So I'm going to bind off. Okay, and we're still going to flip our work like we normally would if we hadn't bind it off. Okay, so we just grab our second color, or the next color we're going to be working with, and create a slip knot. And we're going to start in the very last stitch that we worked, so the very last single crochet, and I'm working under both of the loops. Okay, and then just pull that through, and we're going to chain 1. And for this particular pattern, that chain is not going to count as a stitch. Okay, so we want to make 1 single crochet into the same stitch. Just makes it a little bit easier and have cleaner edges on the side when we do that. So we have 1 single crochet in the first stitch. We want to make 1 single crochet into the next stitch And then we're going to make a half double crochet into the next, and another half double crochet, and then a double crochet into the next stitch, and a double crochet into the next, and now we're going to make a treble crochet. So wrap 2 times, and another treble crochet, and one more treble crochet. And now we're simply going to work that same stitch sequence in reverse. And one double crochet into the next, and then a half double crochet, and another half double crochet, and now we're going to make 3 single crochets. So 1 single in the next stitch, and in the next, and another single crochet into the next. Okay, and so that's basically the stitch repeat. So to kind of break things down so it makes a little bit more sense, we'll talk about the ends here in just a minute, but just know that we're always going to have 2 half double crochets, and then 2 double crochets, and then 3 trebles, 2 doubles, 2 halves, 3 singles. And that's always going to be the repeat except for the ends. Okay, so on this end we have 2 single crochets. So just keep that in mind. Now we've got our 3 single crochets, and so now we're starting over. We need to have 2 half double crochets, so 1 into each of the next 2 stitches. Okay, and then 2 double crochets, 1 in each of the next 2. And now 3 treble crochets, 1 into each of the next 3 stitches. Okay, now 2 double crochets, 1 into each of the next 2. Now 2 half double crochets, and if we've done everything correctly, we should end up with 2 stitches here at the end, and that is for 2 single crochets. So 1 single crochet into the last 2 stitches. Okay, so let's just recap this row really quickly. So on the ends, when we're working with this particular row, we're going to have 2 single crochets on each end. And then we're going to go through a sequence of stitches where we have 2 halves, 2 doubles, 3 trebles, 2 doubles, 2 halves, and 3 singles. Okay, and so we're just simply repeating that for this row. Now this is row 1 of our pattern repeat, but now if you remember correctly, it's actually row 2 for this swatch because we have our foundation row here. And so again, I am changing colors, so I would just go ahead and bind off. And now I'm going to proceed to row 3 for this swatch, which is actually row 2 of the pattern repeats. Okay, the second row of the pattern repeat is very simple. We're just going to create a slip knot, and we want to insert it into the first stitch. Now after I bind it off, I went ahead and flipped my work. So just flip it like you normally would and bind on by creating 1 chain, and we're going to single crochet into the same stitch. Again, that chain 1 doesn't count as a single crochet for this pattern. Now for this row, all we want to do is make 1 single crochet into every single stitch. That's it. That's all there is to this row. So at the end of the third row of this swatch, your work should look something like this. And again, I'm going to bind off of my accent color here. And then we're going to flip our work just like normal and create a slip knot just like we have been. Now if you aren't changing colors, there's no need to, bind off and bind on like we have been. You would just simply make the chains, flip your work, and then keep going like you normally would. So we just want to insert our hook into the first chain here, the first stitch here. Okay, place the new color on your hook. And we're going to start off with treble crochets because, like I said, these are going to be the long stitches here that are filling up the gap and creating a smooth edge. So we're going to bind on with 3 stitches. And normally a treble crochet, when you're working them as a chain here, they're actually the equivalent height of 4 chains. But I found that you have a much cleaner looking edge if you're only using 3. So that's why I'm creating 3 chains here. We're going to make a treble crochet into the next stitch. And then a double crochet into the next. And a double crochet into the next stitch. And so we're basically using the same stitches, the same order of stitches that we did for this row here of purple. We're just changing the order in which we start. So now a half double crochet into the next 2. And now 3 single crochets. And we want to make sure, this is kind of like my checkpoint. It's really easy to get thrown off or to have your whole piece shifted over 1 stitch. If you forget a stitch or if you add too many, then it'll throw your count off and you'll find out at the end. So what I like to do as a checkpoint is I find my 3 treble crochet stitches from this purple row below here. And that's where I want to make sure, okay, my 3 single crochets have to sit on top of these 3 treble crochets in order for everything to work out properly. So I've confirmed that here. Now they're not going to sit directly on top because we have this row of single crochets, but they should be in the same location. It's actually going to be shifted over just a tiny bit depending on if you're right or left-handed. But you want to have the 3 single crochets basically on top of the 3 trebles. Okay, now just continue on with 1 half double crochet into each of the next 2, and then a double crochet into each of the next 2, and now 3 treble crochets. And again, I use this as a checkpoint. I want to make sure, since I'm doing 3 trebles, I want to make sure that they're sitting on top of the 3 singles from 2 rows below. Okay, now 2 double crochets into the next 2 stitches. Well, 1 double crochet into each of the next 2, rather. And 1 half double crochet into each of the next 2. And now 3 single crochets, and again I'm just making sure I've got my 3 trebles here, so I know I'm on the right track. Okay, now 1 half double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. One double crochet into each of the next 2. Now you should have 2 stitches left if you've done everything correctly, and we're going to make 1 treble crochet into each of the last 2 stitches. We're always going to have a foundation row of just single crochets, and we're going to start off creating the wave pattern by starting on the lower end, so the 2 single crochets. We'll finish that up. We're going to end with 2 single crochets on this edge, and then we're going to make our row of single crochets in the accent color, and then we're going to start off the next wave row with the tall stitches, so the treble crochets. We're going to go over one more row, and so we're going to start off again with a slip knot. That is if you are changing colors. And then this is where I bind it off. So I'm going to rotate my piece this way, and I'm going to bind on in the very first treble crochet there. And we're going to create a chain in order to bind on, but we're not counting that as a stitch. We'll make 1 single crochet into that stitch, and we're going to make 1 single crochet into each stitch across this row. So this was our very simple row. We just make 1 single crochet into every single stitch. So once you reach the end of row 4 of the pattern repeat, you want to be very careful that you don't forget to make a single crochet stitch into the chain. So this is where we started the third row of the pattern repeat, and that's where we created those 3 chains to make the treble crochet, and so that is counting as a stitch. So we have to put a single crochet into that top chain, and so I usually just try to locate that chain and then catch 2 of the loops of the chain and create a single crochet. Now if you forget this step, then it's going to throw your stitch count off for the next row. Okay, so if you run into problems on row 5 of your project, you want to come back and make sure that you didn't drop that stitch there. Okay, so when we're looking at our work from this side, this is the wrong side of our work. So when we're working our single crochet rows, that's the wrong side. When we flip it over here, this is the right side, and we're calling this the right side because, as you can see, it looks a lot neater from this side than it does this side here. Okay, so there are actually 4 rows in this pattern repeat. Okay, and so once you make it to row 4 of the pattern repeat, then you're just going to start over with row 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're just going to repeat that until your piece is as long as you need it. This concludes our demonstration for the wavelength stitch. Now I have a really cool project in the works for this stitch, and it's going to be using Bernat blanket yarn, and I'm calling it the Wavelength Afghan. It's a really cool Afghan using this stitch and a total of 4 different colors. So it's a lot of fun. Stay tuned for that pattern. Practice this stitch a little bit, and the pattern for the Wavelength Afghan will be available at BHookedCrochet.com. As soon as it's available, I'll link to it in this video so you can access it that way. Thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned for more free patterns and video tutorials at BHookedCrochet.com.